Hey friend, Colin from SonicScholar.com. As a software engineer, you regularly work on projects with lots of moving pieces. And even if your code base is small, it grows and grows as features are piled on. And it's difficult over time to keep track of everything that's going on. All right, nobody likes working on code that's confusing, lacking documentation, which is why today we're going to have a nice heart-to-heart on commenting your code. By commenting your code well, you can make a positive impact on the products you work on and earn the respect and gratitude of your teammates for writing software that's easy to read, easy to maintain. Unfortunately, even the best of us can fall into several traps with comments that make our code puzzling and frustrating to our colleagues and even our future selves. Today, I want to talk about 3 traps with respect to code comments and what you can do to avoid them. Now, before we jump in, I want to make sure to hook you up with a guide that I put together. It contains 6 best practices and tips that will help you put the pedal to the floor on your coding productivity and code quality. Commenting code is only one of these tips, and the other 5 are powerful strategies that you can employ today that will supercharge your ability to write code faster and cleaner. So stick around till the end. All right, let's dive in. Trap number 1. Overly commented code. Yes, you can actually add too many comments, and not all comments are useful. Let me explain. Some questions that can lurk in the back of our minds when we write code comments are, what is the intelligence level of the people who will read this code? And how much should I explain what's going on here? Have you ever come across code that literally had a comment before every line of code that follows? While not always the case, that's usually a sign of something funky. Sometimes in an effort to be helpful, we can unintentionally over-explain ourselves in comments. Code that is overly commented will 1. Waste the developer's time by writing excessive comments instead of more code. 2. Waste the reader's time by forcing them to wade through unnecessary clutter in limited screen real estate to try to figure out what's going on. 3. It assumes the reader isn't intelligent enough to make inferences about your intentions on a line-by-line basis. It adds redundancy by repeating what might already be explicitly written in the code anyway. Overly commented code might be better served in things like tutorials, where the audience has a wide range of familiarity and expertise, and it makes sense to be as inclusive as possible. Here are some general litmus tests for overly commented code. Does the comment explain how something is done? Toss it. In the book, The Pragmatic Programmer, under tip 13, authors Andy and Dave mention the code already shows how it is done. So commenting on this is redundant and a violation of the DRY principle. That's don't repeat yourself. Does the comment explain a feature of the programming language? Toss it. Language syntax and features are easily Googleable. Don't waste your time teaching your reader when they might already know or can easily find out. Does the comment explain how a third-party API works? Toss it. Again, this should be easily Googleable. It's the owner of the API's responsibility for documenting their stuff, not you. If the API is undocumented, happened to me before, you may have bigger problems on your hands. Look for another API that will help you accomplish what you need. Now, on the other hand, if your comment explains why you did it this way, clarifies your goal or purpose, discusses trade-offs, makes complex business rules easier to understand and digest, maybe it contributes to the documentation of your public APIs, keep it. Those are great things to have in comments. Moving on to trap number 2, dead code. We've all had or will have a story that goes something like this. I just wrote a bunch of experimental code to help me solve a problem, and it was helpful, but then something broke, so I had to comment it out. All right, I was able to replace my experimental code with something that's more robust and works way better. Now, what to do with this old function? Should I delete it? Better keep it around just in case we need it for the future. Although well-intentioned, this hoarding mentality or sense of insecurity leads us to leave stuff like this in our code bases, cluttering them up for generations to come. If someone's curious about how something may have worked in the past, Use a version control system, something like Git or SVN, that has a blame function that lets them see how the code evolved over time. Now, a similar trap to this is forgetting to keep old comments up to date. Did you change something in the code that now makes that previous comment no longer relevant? Imagine how frustrating and confusing it would be for someone to read a comment about code that's not even intended for. Delete unused code, keep old comments up to date, and you won't fall into the trap of leaving dead code and comments in your code base. Finally, trap number 3, uncommented or undercommented code. Now, some people might throw around phrases like, "My code is self-documenting," as this nebulous umbrella term to justify why their code has no comments. Self-documented code, or code that is written clearly, concisely, has descriptive variable names, function names, class names, etc., is absolutely something that we should strive for. But it doesn't mean the rest of your team or even your future self will have all the context to understand your code. Objection! I'm the only one who works on this code. No one needs to understand it but me. Well, most of the time, you are not the only one who needs to understand your code. But even if that were true, your memory is not perfect. I guarantee that you are not going to remember why you made every decision about why you wrote some code in a certain way for every single line of code you've ever written. Do your future self a favor, comment your code. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine an engineer in the field disarming unexploded ordnances and landmines. Every once in a while, he comes across a device that requires an unorthodox solution. Using his wealth of experience and intuition, perhaps he can safely remove the device from the field, but more work is needed to fully and properly disarm it. He may or may not be the same person to follow up on this work, which is why he provides a brief, concise, clear context for the problem he encountered, what steps he took to resolve the issue, and what remains to be done. Likewise, software can be riddled with these metaphorical landmines. When you come across them, the responsible thing to do is to provide useful information or context so that the code stays understandable and maintainable, helping the next person who comes along avoid getting blown up by one of these landmines. Here are some tips for improving your code that is lacking in comments. First, use comments for generating documentation. Languages like C# and Java have XML docs and Java docs style comments that can decorate things like classes, interfaces, methods, fields, properties, tons of things. Modern IDEs will even help you auto-generate these comments with places that you can fill in the relevant information for the stuff that you're documenting. When you're ready, there are tools that can even scan your source code and generate a nicely formatted document for you. And that documentation is even accessible inside the IDE. That is so helpful to programmers. Does every construct in your source code need a dot comment? It depends. Are you making a library for some other people to use, or is it just a hobby project? Think about your audience and make a judgment call about whether you need a dot comment. Next, explain why you wrote it this way. There might have been several ways to accomplish something, and you probably made a conscious or subconscious evaluation of all the alternatives, and you settled on your solution. Was it for performance, readability, reliability, best practice? This is great context to provide. Next, code hacks. We've all been there. If you have to write a hack to get something to work and it's important enough to leave in the code base, please, for the love of Mike, leave a note. Consider answering these questions in your comment. What were you trying to accomplish? Why is this solution a hack, and how do you wish it could be better? What alternatives did you try, and why didn't they work? What was your thought process behind your solution? How might you encourage someone else to find a better solution? Remember, you gotta strike the balance between providing lots of helpful context while being as brief and concise as possible. Next, complex or confusing code. If something about the algorithm makes it hard to understand what's going on, feel free to leave a comment, clue people in. You can also reference any relevant documentation or references. You know, like that link to the Stack Overflow post you totally sniped that code from. Alright, wrapping up. We covered 3 common traps that engineers fall into when commenting code. I hope this has been helpful to you and you feel empowered to write clean, well-documented code that you can be proud of. It earns you the respect and admiration of your team. Now, as a thank you for watching, I want to give you my 6 tips for writing excellent software. This is a no-fluff, quick start guide that will help you get results immediately. Go to www.sonicscholar.com/6 tips, all lowercase. Now do me a favor in the comments, tell me which of these 3 traps that we discussed today are you most tempted to fall into, and what is one thing that you want to apply next time you're at the keyboard coding away. Hit the like and subscribe button if you feel like this content is helpful, and I'll see you in another video soon.